speaking of bad behavior within the sport of mixed martial arts, it's time to. I guess maybe we should make this a weekly segment at this point. The tales of Mike Perry. Now he has come into some more legal trouble. He punched looks like three people, or at least struck three people at some bar, arguing with I guess the story from the police reports goes that he got into some argument with a guy who said bumped into him or hit him or something. He struck the man. The man's girlfriend, I guess, came at him about it. He struck her. And then when he's being asked to leave this establishment and trying to be escorted out, he punched some man who got involved with the conflict as well. So this definitely struck a different chord with me. I've no secret that I've never really been a fan of Mike Perry, and a very, very vocal critic, and proud to say so. But this had a much uglier tone to me. This was darker, more disturbing, and almost made me feel sorry for him in some strange way. That this is a man who needs help. Like I'm reminded to an even more extreme John Jones's last legal incident, where he was drunk talking to the police officer, and it just seemed like a pretty close point to rock bottom. That's the vibe I got from this one, Pat. Are you with me on that? Are we seeing rock bottom for Mike Perry right now?
The scary thing for me is I don't know that this is necessarily rock bottom for him. I agree that I didn't, given Mike Perry's other antics, a lot of times I either get annoyed or I, kind of roll my eyes, or it's kind of more anger of like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? I agree. This time, the emotion that I felt when I saw this was just kind of sad, just kind of melancholy of like, man, this is hard to watch. This is just, really sad to see. Given the whole incident and the video that's out there on Twitter that blew up, went viral, it's clear that he's got a lot going on in his life and something is off. That, to have that kind of reaction doesn't make sense. Even if you look at his old videos, right, where he would be making jokes in pool parties, doing things, his jokes were annoying and were bad in their own way, but this has a whole different demeanor towards it. I don't know that we've necessarily hit rock bottom is the thing. This is a bar fight, right? Who knows what happens behind the scenes? Who knows what happens with other incidents that aren't filmed? Some of the things he tweeted about I believe he tweeted about something about the end of days is coming, and that, everyone can kind of, go to hell, and kind of a profane ridden rant where he's basically damning everyone and kind of in this me versus the world mentality. That coupled with this video is never a good sign of someone's mental health. I hope he gets some help with this. What help he needs, I don't know, but I don't know that this is rock bottom. I would not be shocked, and I'd be curious to hear your opinion. I wouldn't be shocked if we see a worse video come out in the following weeks. Do you think that that's possible? I certainly think it is.
Absolutely. At this point, I'm kind of expecting it as well. I'm reminded of some other past incidents, like BJ Penn, for instance. We were crucifying the UFC for still booking this man, and all these incidents that were alleged to have occurred in Hawaii surrounding him and trouble that he was getting into. But the UFC kept booking him, and it was just, it was someone else's problem. We'll just keep letting them fight. If the UFC takes the same approach with this, I can see this being a whole lot worse. And unlike when War Machine flew off the handle and damn near killed his ex-girlfriend, Christy Mack, the UFC can't just wash their hands with him and say, hey, he's not our fighter. That was sort of the saving grace that the promotion had at that time. War Machine had been a problem from a behavioral standpoint for quite some time, and incidences of him, fighting movie sets and just all sorts of just knucklehead behavior. And all the promoters that kept booking him at the time just left it to his own devices to seek out help and whatnot. And then you get into this point where he does something heinous, and now we need to figure out what went wrong here. If the UFC wants to prevent a situation like that, they might want to do something that they normally don't do when old men get punched in bars, and that's step in and not reward them with a huge pay-per-view spot. It just seems like if there's any level of responsibility on the promotion, like, now it's time to exercise it.
Yeah, this is a very dangerous spot for the promotion to be in, because, as you said with BJ, that was a whole train wreck that everyone saw coming, and you could see it in terms of the deterioration, the bar fights, and he didn't have anything in him. That's the one saving grace there, where it seems like he could not compete at that level. So that kind of gave the UFC even more, ammunition for when he got in that last bar fight. They were like, all right, it's time to cut him. He's not competing at that level. It's fine.
You get knocked out by a fat guy at the bar, you're probably not a UFC caliber fighter.
Exactly. And the dangerous thing with Mike Perry is that, again, he's got a little bit of a following. He makes headlines, good or bad, but draws attention to the promotion. He can still fight. He just, beat Mickey Gall. He's looked competitive in his last several fights. He doesn't look like a guy like BJ Penn that's on a 5-fight losing streak, is barely hanging in there, can't really compete as much. The UFC is going to have this dilemma of, do you continue to book him? Do you take him away for a time and say, oh, we're going to get him help, or we're going to do something of that nature? Do you roll the dice doing that? Because you're right. If you have a situation where he's continued to be given, high pay-per-view spots or main card spots on even just ESPN shows, and he gets that attention and continues to get on the mic where who knows what he's going to say. And then you have an incident outside the sport that is particularly bad. That's going to set back MMA as a sport from the mainstream in a big way, especially right now with more eyes on them than ever. They're the only sport that's currently, being shown live. This is a very precarious spot for the UFC. The prudent move here would be to take him off, make sure he gets help, kind of publicize that and say, hey, we're going to help. We're going to give him help. We're going to make sure he does what he needs to do to rehabilitate, and then bring him back out. Will they do that? I don't know. And that is, if they don't, that's really rolling the dice, in my opinion, in terms of what could be very public backlash if things go wrong.
Definitely. And I think, too, it's very important for us to not forget just how close this sport was to being completely banned, to being completely written off as a circus act in very recent memory. So don't let the ESPN broadcasting deal fool you. Don't let Reebok on the shorts fool you. This is still a very, very much a fringe sport. MMA doesn't have the luxury of having, some athlete run amok in the streets and doing something horrible, heinous, and violent, and it not being a black eye on the sport. It just doesn't happen that way. When Ray Caruth, for instance, the former Panthers receiver who plotted to have his pregnant girlfriend killed, that didn't put a black eye on the NFL or football as a whole. The sport was very well established and a huge machine behind it. So it was seen as a bad human being that got into this spot. That's not a luxury MMA has. That's just simply something that's not afforded to, combat sports in general, but especially to mixed martial arts. So if even from purely a business standpoint, the UFC wants to get ahead of something really tragic happening and something that's really going to put them and the way they treat the athletes under intense scrutiny, it's time to help Mike Perry. He desperately needs it, and I don't think there's any evidence to say otherwise at this point.
Yeah, no, I mean, and even, we bring up the NFL, even then, whenever there's been any sort of, appearance of impropriety from a player, whether it be from domestic violence or from any incidents outside of the sport, they take that very seriously. You have lots of cases. Ezekiel Elliott, right? That's a big one where that kind of was ended up. The further that investigation went, they got a little overzealous. At least that's what the evidence seemed to appear based on what happened with Goodell's suspension. But the fact of the matter is they always have sided on the caution of this might be an issue, and we're going to take care of it now. We're not going to let it linger. We're not going to let a player stay on the field and continue to cause disruptions. Antonio Brown is a great example of that, with how that's all gone down, and that's kind of well known throughout the league, right? In terms of if you as a player are doing things off the field, there are ramifications. It's not that the NFL just lets it go by. They at least give the appearance of doing something. The fact that the UFC might very well just say nothing and then book Mike Perry while this is all going on is very concerning. And I agree that he needs help, and the UFC should step in there. Even just from a business, as you said, business appearance, the appearance of saying, hey, we're going to try and help Mike out, and we're going to do this, I think is very important. And I would be not that surprised if they didn't. And that's an interesting place to put the sport, because as you said, we're already put in this group. We don't exactly have the luxury of being a giant, billion-dollar machine like the NFL is. What happens, I don't know, and it'll be curious to see if any of the fighters bring this up at the UFC 251 post-fight press conference. But I definitely think if you're the UFC here, from a purely cover your ass standpoint, you need to say something. You need to say you'll offer to give Mike Perry some help, and you need to not put him in a fight for quite a while to make sure that you are covered. So that something worse doesn't happen.